LSU beats Texas in a key early season national showdown. What did we learn from the result? Clemson handled A&M again, but now comes their recent ACC nemesis Cuse on Saturday night. What do we expect? Jeff Monken blew his shot for a signature win at Ann Arbor, but it's the winning team everyone wants to criticize. Cal beats Washington in consecutive seasons, but no one on the East Coast appears to care. And Mark Stoops gives gamblers a reason to believe that covering spreads matters to head coaches. All this and more on OFN College Football Weekly with Mitch Light of Athlon Sports for this Friday, 13th of September, 2019 on the Our-Lads Football Radio Network. Brought to you by ourlads.com, providing the best pro and college football depth charts in the industry. And Athlon Sports, the leading publisher of preseason annuals for more than 50 years, sold in 60,000 outlets nationwide, including Athlon's 2019 College Football Annual, which is available at your local newsstands now. All right, Mitch. So what did we learn from LSU beating Texas? It was a great game. There was a lot of points. You tell me. I'll go next.
Learned that LSU's promise to evolve its offense and join the modern age of college football has come to fruition. Obviously they need good players to do it. They've never lacked good players on offense. They've maybe had some mediocre quarterback play, but they were that offense was as advertised. We saw it in against Georgia Southern, but that was Georgia Southern. What they did against Texas was breathtaking. I don't know if that's too strong of a word, but for those of us that have watched LSU over the years, that was very, very impressive.
Yeah, Joe Burrow, by the way, dropped from 50-1. He's now 10-1 to win the Heisman.
Hey, right, big. He's a quarterback for an SEC team, a top 5 team, and he had a big game on a big stage. That'll do it to you.
Absolutely, he deserves it. But look, the thing that we also were troubled about regarding Texas, at least I was, and we talked about this when we were going over whether it's Texas winning a Big 12 championship, that's one thing. A national championship is completely different. I think what this proves to us is, they could win the Big 12 championship, but they're just they have to have significant improvement from now until the end of the season on defense. I can't see them stopping any of the big teams if they get to the playoffs. Yeah,
they're very young on defense. Their secondary is very young. They've they continue to recruit well. They've got a good offensive coordinator in Todd Orlando, but my thoughts going to the game that LSU was just a little bit more of a complete team. LSU's defense obviously had its troubles against Texas there, so I think your point's valid. That they look like a team that can maybe win the Big 12, but they don't really look like a playoff team.
Okay, now Clemson gets the win over A&M, and really what I took see everybody, and deservedly so. Clemson, great team. They're a dynasty. They win a game rather easily, and everybody wants to talk about Clemson's still a great team. I know we do this for a living. We spend a lot more time on these teams than they do, the outside public. But first of all, Clemson's offense, for some reason, doesn't seem to be clicking on all cylinders just yet. Number two, the game, I think, really talked more about how bad Kellen Mond was. I mean, and it wasn't like he was being pressured all over the place, and therefore his throws sailed here, sailed there. He was just sailing throws without pressure. It was just I wanted to see the best of Kellen Mond, and then I wonder what kind of game we could have had.
Yeah, he was fantastic against Texas State. And again, I understand the competition there, and we kind of elevated, or I elevated, you expect guys to make all the throws. And when you've maybe have 3, 4, 5 opportunities to make that big throw in a game, if you're off by a yard or two, then, you're not, it's obvious, but you're not making the completion. And is it because the defense? Is it because he's anticipating something, a rush that's not there? Is it the pressure playing the number 1 or 2 team in the country? We can't answer that, but, I'm with you there. I'm not going to panic by any stretch on Clemson. Trevor Lawrence hasn't been great. He's been fine. It's what we do with elite teams. We don't necessarily talk about what they do well. We talk about what they don't do well. But we'll find out more Saturday night. But I'm with you too. I don't really think it was a blow to Texas A&M. They're still building a championship, or what they think is a championship program. But it just kind of was a reality check for them. That you might be a top 10 team. You're not close to a top 3 or 4
And
team.
you can't beat the best team in college football if you're not playing at your best. That's
Right. They
easy.
played at their best 2 years ago at home and
That's
almost beat
right.
them. They clearly weren't their best on Saturday.
Okay, speaking about not being at their best, and that's Michigan. They're still not at their best. I was afraid that we would see this as a Michigan fan more
I was
in week
wrong.
2. Yeah, see, we talked about that. The inflated spread for me, which is the reason why I felt that Army could be in this game. I didn't like what I saw in week 1. I just didn't. We talked about it, and I'm not seeing now. Look, Peoples is out. That I think he's their best offensive player. I just do. But still, it's Army. Patterson's the problem. There's something wrong with him. I don't know if it's psychological. Maybe he's just peaked. Maybe he's just one of those quarterbacks that peaked too early in his career, and that's just what you're going to get. He's not going to be able to lead a team. He's going to need too much help in order to do it.
Yeah, I mean, he's had 5 fumbles in 2 games. They didn't really move the ball consistently. I think they only had 2 drives over 50 yards against Army, and that's troubling there. And new first-time play caller. There's a lot of pressure on Josh Gaddis, and we're not behind the curtain. We don't know what the calls are and the audibles and all that stuff, and how similar this offense is to what Shea Patterson ran at Ole Miss and in high school. So, I think there's time for both Josh Gaddis to grow as a play caller this year and Shea Patterson to kind of get more comfortable. But it is a little alarming. Right now you'd have to, we picked on our magazine Athlon Sports, we picked Michigan to win the Big Ten East. But right now, obviously Ohio State looks like the better team. But 2 games apiece, both at home. They're a combined 4-0. We'll find out later.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things work with the bye week for them. Now they get into the Big Ten, the huge game coming up with Wisconsin all of a sudden next week. But we'll see what happens too. Whether it's and you made a good point with the play calling, because there was a play, the fumble, the fullback. I don't even know who the kid is, but first thing I said to myself was, I don't recall Alabama handing the ball off to fullbacks. I mean, this is Michigan football. This is Jim Harbaugh football. I thought this was Gaddis football.
Right.
Yeah, this has got to stop. Now, maybe they're doing it because they need to recruit more and get the kids that Gaddis needs. And, sometimes you got to still play a little bit with the players you have. All right.
But this isn't the year for that.
You're
this
right.
is the year where they had the roster built to win a championship.
Yeah.
So if you make the move to this offense, you better be sure you have the personnel to run this offense this year, in my opinion.
Yep, good point. And we'll talk more about that game next week for sure. That's a big one. By the way, regarding getting back to Clemson and Syracuse this week, big spread as well it should be, 28 points. And we've seen just one blowout in the last several years between these two teams, but we have seen a blowout. What do you think? I mean, do you think anything can happen here based on the way Syracuse has played them tough the last couple of years?
2 thoughts there. One is yes, because they've played them close the last 2 years, and there's a genuine belief system at Syracuse. Those players, a lot of the roster was there when they won 2 years ago. Most of the roster was there when they went down to Clemson and almost won last year. That's one side of the equation. The other side is this Syracuse defense gave up touchdowns on, I believe, 7 of Maryland's first 8 drives. They scored a touchdown.
Yeah.
That's just alarming. Okay, you go down there and you lose 34-30. Okay, maybe slightly surprising, even though Maryland was favored, but the way they lost is alarming for that defense. So, you got to be – I think it's wishful thinking from the Syracuse side if you think you're going to win this game, even though you almost beat them last year.
And remember, we have a different quarterback. And we could say –
yes,
I mean, look –
DeVito has not been as – I expected kind of immediate plug-and-play from him. That has not been the case.
Yep, agreed. And I do want one more note before we move on from Army, Michigan. I said this in the open. I thought that Monken, the play call, 14-7, late in the third, I think it was, late in the third, and they've got the ball at the 5 of Michigan, or 6, and it's 3rd and 5. All they had to do was run the football, which is what they do best. If they don't get a touchdown, they kick a field goal, they go up 10. Instead, they throw the football, interception. That changes the entire game. I thought that was a terrible play call.
Yeah, if it works, it's a great play call. They throw the ball sparingly, and that's why they're effective statistically, from a yards per attempt, because they catch teams off guard. Sometimes you can outthink yourself. It's one of those, if it works, great. If it doesn't, you got people like us saying, why don't you run the ball?
All right, Cal and Washington. Let's give Justin Wilcox all the credit in the world. I know it took a while for you, but this is legit now. They have got a really good defense. That is, to me, that's the most underrated defense in college football. They still got some issues on offense. I don't think there's any question about that. But what guts for that team to put up 17 points in the second half in Washington and to come down the field and capitalize on that field goal, which is close to a touchdown. But, I mean, that shows me an awful lot on the Cal side.
Yeah, I mean, 2 years in a row, did it last year without scoring an offensive touchdown. The defense, great secondary. You mentioned the game, the field goal, the drive to set up the winning field goal. You wouldn't expect that under pressure from a Cal offense. If that defense can stay consistently good and they can, complement that with an offense over the next few years, Cal will be a serious threat in the Pac-12 North because, Justin Wilcox done nothing but good things since he's gotten there, and when you can beat Chris Peterson in Washington 2 years in a row, that's kind of sending a message.
And they get North Texas this week. They're a big favorite as well. They should be. And I know that I'm actually thinking about taking them. It's a possibility. They're not one of my top picks yet. I'm going to post my top picks a little bit later on. I still haven't finished with my picks yet this week. But let's go over some of the key games this week and also go over some of your top picks. Let's start with the games today quickly. Wake Forest and North Carolina. This is not an ACC game, whatever that means. I know what that means, but the fans will be confused. So it's not an ACC game. Wake Forest is a 3-point favorite at home. You got to love what's going on at North Carolina with Mac Brown, the true freshman quarterback, the way that they marched down the field to win that game against Miami late. Everything is going great for North Carolina. But now they step up. They play a tough Wake Forest team. This is a real good measuring stick for both of these programs. I'm going to lean towards Wake, but I think anything can happen in this one.
Yeah, I mean, the spread's tight. Two really good quarterbacks. North Carolina is, they're just living the good life right now. I saw Bill Connolly from ESPN, who's been a longtime contributor to Athlon Sports. Enjoy his work. He does, win probabilities and stuff based on the stats, the stats that he finds important. He had Carolina's win probability over Miami at like 30-something, 31 or 32%. Obviously, they rallied to beat South Carolina. And the name of the game is finding ways to win, and they are finding ways to win. I think Wake's probably the better team right now. Very good offense. Is impressed with what they did. Took care of business at Rice after Rice gave Army a very tough game. So I think Wake is – both teams obviously playing with a ton of confidence. I like Wake at home.
Okay, now the game later tonight is a game that you like. It's not one of your top 3 picks, but it's a game that you like. So, and I'm gonna take the opposite approach here. I'm gonna, and the reason being is I just think this is one of those games. This is what I do with like 80% of my upsets. Is I go with games not necessarily where I feel, I like them. I think they're going to win the game as an upset, but I think they got a good shot, at least a decent enough shot as an upset. They're almost a 3-1 dog, Houston. They're playing at NRG Stadium, which they happen to be, I think, undefeated there, 3-0 in these, kind of big
beat Oklahoma years ago.
Oklahoma a couple years ago when they were ranked number 3. Big opportunity for Holgerson and King to bust out after playing okay at Oklahoma. At least they got that kind of a test out of their system. With Washington State, we kind of know what we're going to get from them. It's a different quarterback every year, but I think this would be a fun game either way.
Yeah, I picked Washington State. You look at, it's still dangerous to look at stats this early because, schedules and stuff. But even against Prairie View A&M, Houston's pass defense has not been good at all. They've been torched 2 games in a row. And, that's obviously not a good recipe. When Washington State's coming to town, Anthony Gordon has been outstanding. He's completing over 81% of his passes, 9 touchdowns, 1 interception. So, schedule hasn't been difficult here. So I think Washington State, I think that offense travels, and I think this Houston team wasn't quite as good as you expected against Prairie View A&M. So I'm not loving what I've seen so far from Houston.
And again, keep in mind the stadium they're going to be playing at, it's only a few miles from campus, so that helps out. It's like a home game. That's really what it is, even though I'm sure there'll be more tickets available for Washington State in this one than it would have been if it was at Houston's home turf. But here's a trend. Houston is 13-1-1 against the spread as dogs of more than 1 point over the last 6 years, and that includes the cover against Oklahoma Week 1. So I just have to decide whether or not to go with the outright upset or just take those points and that very interesting and successful trend that's been going on for a while. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of Tom Herman. Tom Herman's a noted successful as a
that's
dog,
true.
and
he had a lot of part of that. Yeah. Yes, he did, and almost. And wow. I mean, you talk about a killer way to lose the spread. Now, that did get to about 6.5 at game time. So if you took the half point, which I always do, you push. So I did push when it was all said and done. But you basically, and I think, look, we could look at this two ways. One, with the spread. Two, just with the game itself. What are you doing on 3rd and 15 blitzing? I understood the second down blitz. I don't understand a 3rd and 15 blitz. I just don't.
Didn't work. Easy to say now. Great throw. Big play in the game, obviously.
Yeah, and then all you had to do in a point spread factor is make a tackle. The game is over. So all you had to do is make sure not to give up a touchdown on 3rd and 15, and you would have covered that spread if you were Texas.
I don't think Todd Orlando was thinking that about the point spread at that
but
time.
He should have been thinking about the win, and I just think they outsmarted themselves. Okay, sort of like Jeff Monken. Okay, now let's get to Stanford and Central Florida, and I think the spread's gone up to about 9, and it might go up even further with all these injuries to Stanford. I know Costello's back. That's huge. There's no question about that, but the injuries are piling up for Stanford.
Yeah, Walker Little, their outstanding left tackle, probably an All-American type guy, is out. And this is Stanford's first game in the state of Florida that's not a bowl game ever. Never played a road game in Florida other than bowl games. So Stanford defense was not good last week against USC. 3 straight 70-yard drive for plus to end the second quarter, and then then USC poured it on in the third quarter. And I've been concerned about the Stanford defense for several years. They seem to regress slightly every year, and the identity of the program is changing here. I think this is just an enormous game. Every time they can beat a Power 5 opponent, it's going to be huge for them. It'd be interesting to see what they do with the quarterback position. They have 3 options basically. Gabriel, the freshman who started last week. Wimbush has been banged up, and then Mack has been cleared. Evidently, started late last year. So I don't think it matters too much, probably with their game plan. But that number's a little high for me. Stanford's a proud program that I think they're hearing everyone talking about UCF wanting to roll up a big number. So I didn't pick this game, but I might go Stanford against the number.
Yeah, it's a juicy tempting money line spread. It's almost 3-1 on the money line spread. They do have the tropical storm threats in the vicinity as well to keep an eye on. It shouldn't impact the game, but that's just something also. And I think it's been since 2014 since Stanford has played a game on the East Coast. So that's also
body clock. Watch out for the body clock.
What would you do with quarterback? I'd go with Gabriel.
Yeah, true freshman right from Hawaii. Played well last week. Wimbush, you kind of know what you have there. You kind of know his ceiling. So hard to say, but probably go with Gabriel.
Yeah, not sure what happened last week with Wimbush. I've
just been banged up. I don't know specifically what it is.
So they say, yeah. So, all right. As far as Michigan State, Arizona State, revenge game for Michigan State. This is your top sleeper into the playoffs. So far, so good. The defense is just rolling right now. The offense picked it up last week. This is a very dangerous team in the Big Ten, and now they get a revenge spot against Arizona State and a young quarterback.
Yeah, Michigan State's after a dismal Week 1 offensive performance against Tulsa, they go for 8.7 yards per play last week against Western Michigan. That's the most in a single game in at least 10 years. So, obviously Western Michigan's not an elite defense, but that's still something after their Week 1 struggles. Arizona State they've got some injuries up front. They were sluggish last week. It was like 19-7 win over an FCS opponent. true freshman going on the road against that defense. At first, I thought the spread was a little high, but then it makes sense when you factor all that in.
Yeah, because usually if it's Ohio State or even Michigan at times, you go, it's 15, 16 points. It's not a lot. We just don't look at it the same way with teams like Michigan State. But, hey, if they're really that good, 14, 15 points shouldn't really matter.
Yep. Yeah, we'll find out. I mean, I'm not necessarily buying this, this new offense. That was one game. There's been, several years of struggles there, but that was, obviously a sign that Darryl Stewart, wide receivers, had 2 big games in a row. They needed some playmakers to develop, and maybe he's one of them.
Speaking of the Big Ten, you got 2 Big Ten teams as your top picks. You have a 4-star Penn State, a 3-star Northwestern. They're both 17-point favorites. Northwestern has dropped to 17, and I think that's because Bowser is officially out. There's, of course, Green, the quarterback, who was the backup week 1, came in. He's now out for the year as well. Look, UNLV, this might be it for Tony Sanchez. You cannot lose that game to Arkansas State last week, so he's going to have to pull off one upset this year and still get the team to a bowl to hold on to his job, and that's a shame because I thought he was the right fit there, and I think you agreed. And then Penn State's a 17-point favorite against rival Pitt. Unfortunately, the last game we're going to see these 2 teams play for a while unless they get hooked up in a bowl game.
Yeah, I made the Northwestern pick, or I do 10 picks against the spread on our website earlier in the week, and it was at 20. And in fact, I didn't know. And Bowser's on one of my fantasy teams, and I looked it up yesterday. It was questionable, and then you sent me the injury update, and thank you for that because I took him out of my lineup. I didn't see that he was ruled out earlier today. So that's not great for my pick because he's an important part of what they do. But this was more a anti-UNLV pick than a pro-Northwestern pick. They were so bad last week. They got down at home to Arkansas State. And I don't care. Arkansas State's a solid, consistent program. But if you're a Mountain West team, you should not, be getting just destroyed at home by a Sun Belt team. And then Penn State, I just think they're so much better than Pitt. Pitt's offense has been brutal this year, and I think James Franklin relishes the opportunity, like last year, to put up a big number. He's not going to have to deal with Pitt for years. So I think they're just going to blow them out. I think the fact that they had a slow start last week will help. It got those, the players' attention. I think they come out, totally ready to go tomorrow.
Yeah, and unfortunate that in the 100th meeting between these 2 rivals, we will not see them for a while. Maybe good news for Pitt, though, to tell you the truth.
I think so.
The way that's going on. Okay, your 5-star is going to be North Carolina State, and maybe I shouldn't be surprised by this because you jumped all over Missouri last week. This is an anti-West Virginia pick.
Yes, it is, and I'm not by no means am I a professional gambler, but when I've had success making my picks, or it's usually early in the year when you can find a team that is not good, and people haven't kind of caught on yet. A few years ago, I remember UTEP and Rice were just awful, and I won several games picking against them. I think West Virginia is that team this year. Their offense has been brutal. 14 points against James Madison, shut out right at Missouri last week, and NC State's one that's looked good early, hasn't played anyone yet, but McKay's been good at quarterback, and they seem to continue just to reload a little bit there. And so I really like this pick.
All right. How about the matchup where – I'll tell you what, let's talk about injuries because you mentioned that. Florida, Kentucky, Wilson's out for the year. I was very critical of Wilson last year. Got off to a pretty good start so far this year, not against the top competition, so I don't really care. But, look, Sawyer Smith, he started games for Troy. He's not a slouch. It's a nice pickup for Kentucky. It's
much needed after Gunnar Hoke left for Ohio State, too.
Absolutely, and probably better. Who knows?
Yep.
So Florida, meanwhile, we really don't know yet. They had one game. It was ugly, but that was against Miami. The spread, I think, has gone up to 9. I don't know. I get the feeling that this might be a cover game for Kentucky. I'm not saying they're going to win. Not sure yet. I haven't made my final call. I think Florida wins, but I could see this game being close.
Yeah, Florida's got some injuries. I don't know if we talked about these, but I think Tony's out, and I think Henderson, the cornerback,
doubtful.
Might be out too.
Yes, doubtful. Yep.
So that's 2 of their better players, one on each side of the ball there. Kentucky be a good crowd. They're 2-0. Against Eastern Michigan and Toledo, 2 solid MAC teams. There's been years when Kentucky doesn't beat those 2 teams. As they didn't blow either out, but they were solid in both games. And the running game has been pretty good there. So I'm with you. I would probably go Kentucky against with the points.
Okay, Alabama, South Carolina. Now I think this could be an interesting game. South Carolina, believe it or not, historically is one of these SEC teams that has had some success against Alabama. They don't play them a lot.
Well, 2010 is the last time they played.
But they did beat Saban when Saban and Alabama was number one back in 2010. Yep. So that's kind of my point, is that if sometimes you look for anything you can get against teams like Alabama. But I'm also very intrigued by the Helinski kid. It's a very interesting story. He's a top recruit kid. We know what happened to his brother at Washington State. He's got a great arm. This kid could very well end up better than Bentley, yet Alabama early in his career, but still big point spread.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said there. I think Saban, true freshman against elite defenses. Well, Alabama's good defense. I don't know if we're going to call them elite yet, but that's a recipe for disaster. But South Carolina's decent set of pass catchers, really like Brian Edwards.
Yep.
They've got
Shai Smith.
They don't have a. I don't think they have a superstar running back, but Feaster's come in and done a pretty good job. They've got a stable of quality running backs there. I just don't think it's enough. The number's high, but Alabama going on the road for the first time would be a great environment there. So a fun game, but I would be shocked if South Carolina really made Alabama sweat.
Kansas State, we both like Kansas State this week. I know, of course, they were one of my sleepers in the Big 12, and why not? Knowing the pedigree of their new coach. And also for Kansas State, again, I'm a Skylar Thompson fan. I think he's in the right situation now. Revenge game. I haven't been completely impressed with what I've seen from Mississippi State so far. I think they're a little bit now, well, not a little bit, a lot more vulnerable on defense than they were last year, which was an elite defense for them of historical, historical. You okay there? I'm getting a little scratchy.
Yeah.
Okay,
I've got a stat on Mississippi State that I wanted to talk about.
Go right ahead then.
Yeah, so first of all, Kansas State, they questions at running back Gilbert, the Ball State transfers coming with 2 straight 100-yard games. And Mississippi State, the level of competition hasn't been great. They've allowed 5.5 and 6.5 yards per play against Louisiana and Southern Miss. Last year did not give up more than 5.4 in any one game, and that obviously includes other SEC West teams. That was a historically great defense at Mississippi State last year that they don't reload like that. I think Mississippi State dominated this game at the line of scrimmage last year, and I just don't think they're as good at the line of scrimmage. So I think it's going to be a fun one to watch. I probably would go Mississippi State to win, but I think it'll be really close.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is, again, one of those games where I would consider it a coin toss game, which is why I believe that probably wouldn't be a bad idea to risk going with Kansas State and the money line as well, which is something that I'm definitely thinking about doing. But we'll see. Big opportunity early on in Chris Kleinman's career to see. And Thompson could also use a signature win as the quarterback there, the young quarterback for the Wildcats. He's played a lot, but still,
They really struggled, and I have the stats somewhere, but really struggled against SEC teams in the past 5, maybe this whole decade. They beat Arkansas maybe in a bowl game. But other than that, Auburn, they lost at Vanderbilt a couple years ago. I think they got swept by Auburn, and they just this is an important game for them. It'd be a great win for that staff.
And that's why Kleinman's there.
Yep.
It's time to beat these teams. Speaking of Arkansas, Colorado State is your upset pick of the week. Arkansas is officially going to turn the reins to Starkel at quarterback. They're a 10-point favorite in the game. Colorado State, the line, I think they're almost a 3-1 money dog. I do like the way Colorado State looks this year compared to last year. So I kind of see where you're going, but I also think you're going to say this is more against Arkansas than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say if the move to Starkel kind of ignited the offense. I know he was a lot better than Hicks, but Ole Miss had a nice lead in that game, so it's hard to read too much into that. But so it's kind of not to second guess here, but if Starkel plays well, it's kind of Chad Morris just made the wrong call there. This Hicks is the guy he had at SMU, should know him pretty well. Colorado State. Their opening loss to Colorado doesn't necessarily look as bad now. Colorado beats Nebraska. Yeah, I don't like this Arkansas team offensively. They've got some really good young wide receivers. Raheem Boyd's a good tailback. I just don't know that they've got their offensive line's not very good, and obviously they've struggled with the quarterback position.
All right, now let's run through the rest of these before we wrap it up. In the Big Ten, Ohio State, Indiana. What do you think? The quarterback might not play, but Ramsey had a big game last year against Ohio State. I'm not so sure that's going to matter too much. Indiana seems to play Ohio State pretty good for a half, and then Ohio State usually blows them out in the second half.
Yeah, I looked this up. They haven't really come that close, but they've always scored on them. Last 5-6 years they've scored seemingly 17, 24. Ramsey, like you said, has experience. I kind of would have liked their chances more if Penix can play. Maybe break off a few big runs.
Understood.
And that dual threat can maybe cause Ohio State some problems that Ramsey's not going to cause. This is kind of another just Ohio State. They've been impressive in 2 weeks. The next step is, okay, conference game on the road. Let's see what you got. You'd think Ohio State wins this game comfortably.
Indiana 0-7-1 against the spread their last 8 as a home dog. Maryland and Temple. Each week we go on, we find out how for real Maryland is. This is a good game for that because Temple is a really good defensive program.
And they beat them in College Park last year. They handled them with ease after Maryland beat Texas. So I think it's a perfect test for Maryland because, they've got – it's probably – this new staff is probably glad that Temple beat them because Maryland's 2-0.
Uh-huh.
They've got Penn State coming to town in 2 weeks after a bye week. If they can win this game, it's the biggest home game in years at Maryland. So they've got to have these guys' attention to win this game, and I think they will. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. Have not been a Michael Locksley guy just because I remember his New Mexico tenure. Hopefully he's learned, and hopefully he has does a great job there. So far so good. I know 79 points against Howard, nothing to get enthused there or nothing to read too much into that. But obviously it's just really impressive last week. Josh Jackson's been good. Anytime you can score that many touchdowns against Syracuse, 7 touchdowns, first 8 drives, you're doing something well.
And by the way, Temple 6-1 against the spread in their last 7 as a home dog. Iowa State, this is a nice rivalry. They play every year. I don't know how long that's been going on for, but they have been playing every year for a while. Iowa has pretty much owned this series, though, recently. This is a big game for the Iowa State program. They need to knock Iowa off.
I think so, too. Matt Campbell receives a ton of praise, rightfully so. He's done a great job, one of the great young coaches out there, but he's 0-3 against Iowa. You don't want to go 0-4 with game day in town, big, environment. And they're a 2-point dog probably because they've only played one game. They beat Northern Iowa, in triple overtime. I like Iowa State at home. I think they're better than they showed. Their defense was very good against Northern Iowa. I think they'll be, ready to play offensively. I think they win at home.
And the big tackle for Iowa out in this game didn't hurt them, of course, against Rutgers, but Iowa State, they have a really good defense. That could
very good defensive line.
That could be something to keep an eye on. As far as Purdue, one more Big Ten team, TCU. It's a 2-point spread. They've got some injury concerns. Sindelar should play because he practiced on the concussion. But more importantly, their top defensive player, the linebacker
Marcus Bailey,
he's out for the year, and that's not good for a team that struggled on defense last year. I like TCU in this game.
Yeah, I do too. I saw Purdue in person last week, and Sindelar's rep is, he's a good quarterback, makes some good throws, but also makes some mistakes. He threw one awful interception. Quite frankly, should have thrown another one. Vanderbilt had some DBs in position, kind of just overran a few balls and just did not knock down balls that ended up in touchdowns. So obviously Morris, fantastic. They have no running game. They ran for a total of 31 yards last week. I like TCU on the road.
Virginia and Florida State and FSU. Look, we talked week 1 about my sleeper in the Sun Belt, Georgia State, and they upset Tennessee, but I didn't take them. Your sleeper in the Sun Belt, Louisiana Monroe. Now, you didn't take him against Florida State, and they almost won. I mean, Florida State almost lost that game, and I don't even know if Taggart would have survived. Either way, we both really like Virginia, and this could end up being one of my top picks this week.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I think is probably keeping the spread as low as it is because Florida State, there's still probably a section of the public that thinks Florida State's a good football team. I mean, if you're paying attention, they're not. Their scores they've been very good in the first quarter, but look at their second half scores. It's horrendous in 2 games. And Virginia just keeps taking care of business. Perkins has been great at quarterback. Big home game for them. Obviously, the biggest home game in Bronco Mendenhall's tenure, I like Virginia big.
And first time these two teams have met since like 2014. One of those situations.
Yeah, they don't play often.
What do you think of that Oklahoma UCLA game? Because wow, UCLA, I don't know what they're doing. They gotta change quarterbacks or something.
The easy answer is to say Oklahoma can pick its number, but this is one of those games where it seems the number's even a little low, 22, 20, whatever it is. I don't know if UCLA can play that bad offensively 3 straight games. My gut tells me they'll surprise us and maybe cover the spread, but I think Oklahoma rolls.
Washington, Hawaii, undefeated, 2-0, but Washington coming off a loss, probably be an ugly game, you would think.
I think bad spot for Hawaii. They're talking 2-0. Nick Rolovich, funny guy. He tweets out a picture of a rose for the Rose Bowl since they're 2-0 in the Pac-12.
Right.
I think Chris Peterson will have his guys' attention. Hawaii's defense stinks. I think Washington wins.
And USC BYU. The quarterback for USC, the freshman, played really.
Slovis.
Yes, he played really well. And when I look around college football, we talked about Central Florida and their quarterbacks. USC, the kid Sears transferred. I'm so happy about this transfer rule in college football because it's the college game and football in general lacks enough quality quarterbacks. It's not good for the game when good quarterbacks are sitting second and third on depth charts. But this kid looks for real. The only problem is BYU is 9-0 in their last 9 games against the spread as dogs of less than 9 points after they win a football game. But big win for BYU at Tennessee to kind of save their season. The spread kind of looks too easy, though.
Yes.
And that's what concerned me. Then I looked at that BYU trend, and I said, well, maybe there's something to it.
Yeah, it's like they're begging us to take USC, and I fell for the trap. I'm picking USC. I saw the USC game. I saw the BYU game. BYU very fortunate to win that game. Obviously, some breakdowns for Tennessee defensively. Zach Wilson's a good quarterback. He's a tough kid and all that, but they just lack offensive playmakers. Good defense. I think USC is just riding high right.
All right, let's wrap up with these key injuries. So Costello plays. We talked about that. Central Michigan's going to be without their number 1 running back and their top quarterback, so they go to the backup quarterback. David Moore, who played at Garden City Community College last year, by the way. So he's
I think a Memphis transfer.
Okay, and also Bentley officially out for the year. I mentioned Shai Smith for South Carolina. He's questionable for the game against Alabama. Tommy Stevens is expected to play for Mississippi State. There was some question earlier.
Yep.
We talked about some of the others at quarterback. At running back, Reggie Corbin. Now, here's our Eastern Michigan team, and I must bring this up before we end the show because Eastern Michigan, who's been a darling of ours, and they cover a lot of games, and they've basically had the game covered. And with a minute left in the game, for some ungodly, unknown reason, Mark Stoops decides, I'm going to throw the ball in the end zone, not once, but I'm going to do it twice until I score another touchdown. Now, Central Michigan almost came down and actually scored again, but Boise State on Friday night took a knee in the same situation. 95%.
Well, he said why he did.
Wait, you know what? I bet you I know what he said, and I didn't even look.
I'm
going to guess it.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm going to say the reason he did it, this is just a guess, I haven't seen it, he wanted to get Sawyer Smith some experience.
Yes, he told Chris Creighton at the handshake, he said, sorry about that, my guy's out for the year, meaning a starter. I need to get my quarterback some throws.
Yeah, okay, at the 5-yard line, he needs some throws, whatever.
You sound like a disgruntled gambler.
Yeah, and I also read something, and I don't know if you saw this, but there was something, if you type in Mark Stoops and Google it, you'll notice that he's been pointed out nationally by handicappers as a bad spread coach.
Okay.
Interesting that he throws the ball in the end zone after that to make himself a good spread coach. So, yeah, I am a disgruntled gambler.
Sounds like it.
Reggie Corbin, by the way, may not play in this game.
Right.
You know what? I think Eastern Michigan.
Epstein's been out.
And he's out for the year. He's out for the year, Epstein. Yeah. So, you know what? Illinois win 3 straight games. I'm going to find that hard to sink in. Maybe Eastern Michigan rebounds this week.
Yeah, I think it's a good spot. Everyone, Illinois people jumping on the bandwagon. Eastern Michigan's still a solid team. I did like that one.
All right, what else is going on for you before I let you go, Mitch? I know you're heavily into college basketball. When is that? Are you done with that yet?
It's done. It's done. I'm college basketball magazine right here,
Yes.
or Alabama.
I'm going to get
on
one.
Newsstands.
I get one?
Maybe, if you're
Oh,
nice
come
to
on.
me.
I'm
Yes,
a Rutgers
of course you'll
fan,
get
and this is going to be our year.
Yeah.
We're going to be on the bubble this year.
That's the year on the
On
bubble.
That's what we dream of at Rutgers.
I will send you one, but newsstands everywhere. So just, that's what, wrap that up. It's printed. It's in the office on newsstands now.
Mitch, appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week.
All right. Take